Hello to all the debt warriors out there, and welcome back to another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. I'm your host, Katie Fata. June is National Home Ownership Month. During the month of June, organizations recognize the value of home ownership and how owning a home positively impacts families, communities, and the nation's economy. Buying a home seems like a far-fetched dream for most millennials and for Gen Zers because they're a little too young to be thinking about buying a home right now. But for millennials, this dream might not be as unfathomable as you may think. On today's episode, I'll be joined by Laura Marino. Laura is the CEO of a company called HomeFlow, and their mission is to help people save time and money with the recommendations of their step-by-step home buying platform. Laura has created free tools to simplify and manage your home buying process. There are many reasons as to why less and less millennials are buying homes, but one big reason is they believe they can't afford it. Laura and I discuss why this might not necessarily be true. We also talk about other reasons why millennials aren't buying homes and what's ahead for Generation Z when it comes to making this big purchase. Since June is Home Ownership Month, I thought this would be the perfect time to discuss this topic. Now, let's get to my interview with Laura. Hi, Laura. Thanks for being on the podcast today.
Oh, of course. You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So, can you start out by telling the listeners a little bit more about yourself and your career?
Totally. Yeah, my name is Laura Moreno, and I am the founder of HomeFlow. I'm the host of the First Time Homebuyer podcast. And it all started when I bought my first property 2 years ago. The experience was not great, so I decided to leave my full-time job as a product manager in a tech company to start this company to help first-time homebuyers. And what we do is we provide free information and free tools for first-time homebuyers so that they can have a much better home buying experience.
Okay, so it seems like you're pretty well versed in the home buying experience. So can you walk us through what the average first-time home buying experience looks like?
Yes, totally. I mean, what happens today is a little bit far from what I think it should happen. Basically, when you're looking to buy a home, the first thing you do is you download an app, you start browsing for properties online, and at the same time you start going through some mortgage calculators, see how much you can afford. And when you see a property that you like, you get in touch with a real estate agent and you start seeing properties. But that experience, is a little bit far from a good experience because the home buying experience is so complex, so
Right.
difficult. People believe it's like renting a home, but it's not.
Right.
And it has very long-term consequences if you get it wrong. So the ideal scenario is you think about buying a home, you start educating yourself, you start learning more about the process, and then when you're confident, that's when you start getting pre-approved for a mortgage and looking for properties. But at the moment, I think that education part is missing, and we rely so much in the agent, in the lender to give us that education, but that doesn't happen. And at the end of the day, you are left with the long-term consequences of not doing it right.
Right. So if someone doesn't do their research right, they might find some stuff online that's not necessarily true, I guess, about home buying. So what are some misconceptions about first-time home buying if research isn't done properly?
Well, the worst case scenario is you end up buying something that is too much for you, too expensive for you. Because what happens, you go to your lender and you tell him, this is my income, these are my assets, and they give you a budget. Say they tell you, you can buy a property of up to $400,000. And you're like, yeah, let's go and buy properties for up to $400,000. But that lender doesn't take into account many of your expenses. Like if you have a child, it doesn't take into
Yeah.
account the full picture. So what ends up happening is like you become house poor,
Yeah.
which means you don't have a good lifestyle. You cannot afford eating out. If something happens to you, you may lose your home, you enter foreclosure, and that's horrible for the whole family. So that's like worst case scenario, you buy something you cannot afford and you lose it.
Right. People might not, I guess, look at the whole picture, like, oh, I'm approved for this much, but I still have all these other expenses in life. So
Yeah.
so finding and funding a home can be, it could be confusing, I guess you could say, for first time home buyers. So at Navicor Solutions, we offer a service called pre-purchase housing counseling. Would you recommend maybe a first time home buyer or even a second time home buyer look into this kind of counseling?
Totally, totally, 100%. And I think the whole government should make it mandatory for
Yeah.
anyone that is looking to buy a home to go through one of these courses.
Yeah.
Mandatory.
Yeah.
Because also we have the other spectrum where you have an agent, you found your property and you're looking to put an offer. And for example, you find yourself in a very competitive market and your agent suggests, well, how about if you leave the inspection? That will get you that home,
Mm-hmm.
maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And then after you buy the home, you find out you have to pay $20,000 because the roof is not well,
Yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
that education is so, so,
Mm-hmm.
so important to empower yourself because the people that you're hiring, your realtor, your lender, they
Mm-hmm.
have their own agenda. I'm
Yeah.
sure there's like many, many, many good people, but they have their own incentives.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't protect yourself and empower yourself with information, you may end up in a not so good situation.
Yeah. You definitely don't want to put too much trust into someone. You should still know what you're doing.
Exactly.
Right. You should still do your research. So I think that is a great source that we offer for people. So it's true that a lot of people are renting rather than buying, especially for millennials, which this podcast kind of targets millennials and Gen Zers, but a lot of Gen Zers are way too young to be buying houses. So for millennials, it's more common to be renting. And in 2019, 12.3% of millennial renters said they always plan to rent. So with millennials choosing not to have kids or like having a kids very much later and getting married later, does this mean millennials are prepared to pay rent rather than pay a mortgage because they value their freedom? What do you think?
I think I think the generations, millennials, are starting to buy a little bit later on.
Yeah.
If I put in my case, for example, I was I'm 39 years old now, and we bought a home 2 years ago. I'm still a
Okay.
millennial, yay,
Yes, you
thank God.
are.
But I'm 39. We bought a home 2 years ago,
Uh-huh.
and the previous 15 years before that, I've been moving from country to country. So I
Mm-hmm.
totally understand why millennials don't want to tie themselves into one place because
Right.
the world is so big and you want to have so many experiences. At the end of the day, I think I think buying a home, for me, what triggered me to buy a home and my husband was when we had our first child.
Mm-hmm.
His name is Max. And that triggered me the instinct of we need a nest, we need a house for him, we need to leave him something behind. So I think buying a home is still going to be in the 60-70% of America owning a home, but it's going to happen a little bit later on.
Yeah, just a lot later. Because even for me, I look at my parents and they had a home at, 30. And I can't even imagine that. I'm still 5 years away from 30, but I can't even imagine it almost. Seems
Yeah,
too young almost.
yeah, and still for millennials, the other option is to buy something to rent out. I mean, you can still
Mhm.
buying property has so many benefits. So
Right.
you could still buy something that you invest in, that you rent. There's so many good companies that offer properties ready to buy, where you just have to put the deposit down, and they will give you some cash flow every month. So even if you don't want to buy your own home, you can still invest in real estate and get those benefits.
Yeah, that's also a good idea that I think a lot of millennials don't think about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a little bit scary because you don't know who to trust,
Exactly. That's the
but
thing. But
there's so many resources out there to help you with that.
yeah, especially nowadays, there are just so many. But only 37% of millennials own a home, which is about 8% less than Gen Xers and baby boomers. Like I said, my parents don't like we're already married with a kid at my age, so it's so different. So how do you think the rising cost of living and salaries not keeping up are affecting the fact that fewer and fewer millennials own homes? Like, do you think because millennials are making less than what baby boomers and Gen Xers were at our age, is that a reason why millennials aren't buying homes?
Totally. And I will add to that the student debt. I mean,
Yes.
that's a
Yeah.
huge barrier to ownership. And Yeah, people are making less money, they have more debts, and they cannot even figure out how they're going to buy a home. They question themselves, should I pay the debt before? Should I not? What should I do? And I think your institution, and it's a great help for those people so that they can have someone to talk to and say, these are my debts. This is what I want. One day I want to own a home, but am I even in a position to own a home? I think the fact that we have more debt and that we earn less money, of course, influences more millennials not owning a home now.
Yeah, and like lifestyle, the cost of just living is a lot more too in general.
And I think we're also thinking more short term. We're thinking about
Right.
traveling, experiences, and we don't want anything to tie us to one place.
Right. Yeah. Millennials would rather be buying experiences and actual physical things at this. That's what I think, especially with like Instagram and stuff. They want to be able to be out and doing things. They don't want to be tied
Yeah.
down by a mortgage necessarily.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, it's important to think about your financial future.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to sit down for a second and think, what am I going to? I mean, I can still have all these experiences, but maybe I could start building my financial future buying a home. And maybe if I buy a home, I could rent it out if I'm not living there, you know?
That makes
I
sense.
think
Yeah. I
I
know.
think it's important to sit down and reflect on what you want your life to be in the next years.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. I definitely didn't think about it, and a lot of millennials didn't think about. And I know kind of earlier we touched on a little student loans, but according to this website, apartmentlist.com, 62% of millennials who want to purchase a home said they specifically lacked a down payment for the home. So do you think the crippling amount of student debt in this country affecting millennials? Do you think that's affecting them saving for a down payment and purchasing a home?
Totally, totally, 100%. I have a very good friend. She is 35 years old. She has maybe $30,000 on student loans, but she still wants to go and have experiences. So every year she goes on trips 5 times a year,
Oh
and
my
instead of
goodness.
saving that money, she has experiences.
Yeah.
Of course, I mean, you want to have a good life, but again,
But
I think it's important to sit down and reflect. And the other thing is, most people believe that you still need a 20% down to buy a home. You need a 20% deposit. And how in the world am I going to save that? But that's not true. That's not true in these days. Maybe it was true 20 years ago, but today you need 3, 4, 5% deposit. And then you can go to organizations like yours and sit down and see if there's any other down payment assistance programs, which kind of FHA mortgages, I mean, which kind of mortgages can I have? So there are solutions for people. It's just like they don't sit down and consider those solutions. The other thing is, I also met this other friend of mine, and she's now my age, 39, and she bought just now her second home in Brooklyn,
wow.
which is very
Oh,
expensive in Brooklyn. Oh my God.
yes.
And I was telling her, how did you do it? And she said,
Right.
you know what? My parents told me to buy a home 10 years ago. That home appreciated in value. And I'm not selling that home, but with the equity, I'm buying a second home.
Mm.
So two things to mention with that story. One is the conversation of buying properties and financial wealth happens in the family, within the family. Your mom, dad may tell you, do that is the wise thing to do. And the other thing is, the younger you buy, I think the wealthier you're going to be in life. So it's just a matter of sitting down and thinking about your financial goals for the future. What do you want your life to be? Because if you keep on living paycheck by paycheck, it's going to be hard. It's going to be
Oh,
really
yeah.
hard. And the
Yeah.
longer you wait, the worse it's going to be for you.
Yeah. No, that is a really great point to bring up. Do you think for millennials who actually purchase a home, do you think that they have regrets about this decision?
It really depends about what they bought. Many do. I think there are some stats, some kind of like terrifying stats that say many millennials buying home, they have buyer's remorse, which means they regret having bought a home. And that sometimes comes because one, the lack of preparation, and two is maybe overpaying, over purchasing, buying something that they cannot afford. And going into buying a home, when you talk to someone, they're like, my rent is due in 2 months, and I'm going to buy a home before it's due. And you look at them as like, no, that's not the case. You need 6 to 12 months of preparation to really buy a home. It is not a decision to take lightly. You have to really think about that. You have to really prepare. So if you don't do that preparation, if you don't get educated, if you don't talk to people like your company, then you may have regrets. This is why it's important to do as much research as possible and not take it like oh, I'm just going to rent. If I don't like it, I'll sell the next year. It's not going to happen like that. It has long-term consequences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is a big decision to make.
Yeah, totally.
Especially just thinking about expenses, and a lot of people think that they just can't afford it. So what advice would you usually give to young homeowners, who want to purchase a home, but they don't think they can afford it?
I'll just tell them to go to companies like you to sit down with a hard expert
I think a lot of people don't even know where, especially young people don't even know that we would offer that kind of help.
and that is actually very shocking for me because that's true. When I went to buy my first home, I was looking for online help, and the only solutions, like the first thing you need to go is go to an agent and go to a lender. But no one mentions these organizations, and that really caught my eye. It's like, this is perfect. This is advice from a company that is unbiased. That's what you need. Why is this not more mainstream? Why not everyone? Because from my friends, no one knows about these services. How can we make it more mainstream? But what you were saying about your original question. So if I'm talking to someone that is looking to buy a home, I'll say, first of all, get your finances in order, understand what you have, what you owe, and go to one of these organizations to help you do that. And after that, make a plan and follow that plan. If the plan means I need to save more money, start saving more money. Open a different bank account where you don't touch that money and start saving that money. If the plan is I need to increase my credit score, do that. Maybe it may take 6 to 12 months, but you need to make a plan to be able to buy a home, and you can do it. Everyone can do it. I mean, single moms with like no money have done it before. You can do it. It's just a matter of purpose. Do you really want it? And what is the why behind? Why do you really want to own a property? Is it because you want to put a roof under in your family, or is it because you want financial freedom? But be clear to why you want to do it, and then execute on that and take it step by step. You don't eat an elephant in one bite. Just do it step by step, slowly, and you will be able to get it done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's some good advice. So for millennials, so I want to kind of jump to even the next generation behind millennials, which are Gen Zers, since many millennials are kind of already in the mindset they're renting forever. Do you think the same will be true for the next generation, Generation Z, or will there be an economy and lifestyle changes for them to make it easier to purchase a home than it is kind of for millennials to purchase a home? What do you think that their mindset will be?
I cannot say. I think it may be similar to millennials,
Mm-hmm.
but if there's a huge campaign from the government or from companies like ours that tells millennials that it's easy to buy a home, that is doable, they will do it. And Gen Zs. I mean, I think now what happens is, first of all, millennials and Gen Zs, they want to travel, they want to have experiences. But the other thing that happens is there's a huge barrier to buy a home, and that huge barrier is caused because there's a lack of education, and there's also a lack of a system that makes it easy, super easy to buy a home. Let's talk about the travel industry. 20 years ago, you wanted to travel to Kenya, you had to go to a real estate agency, they had to call hotels in Kenya. It was really, really hard. It was a very manual process. But what if in next year, suddenly a solution comes along that makes it so easy to buy a home and so risk-free to buy a home? Then I think more people will encourage themselves to say, yeah, I think this is a good idea. And I can see what's going to be my return in 10 years, 20 years. I think this makes sense. But the problem now is that solution doesn't exist. And it is risky, it is complicated. No one no one of your friends is doing it. You don't want to be the first one.
Right.
You don't trust agents. Agents have this bad reputation. You don't trust them. You don't trust your lender. So it's unless someone in your family is doing it and has done it many, many times and can give you advice, you don't want to be the first one to cross this river that may kill you, you know?
Right.
So I think companies have to provide with that solution. And whoever provides with that solution is going to make a very good step for millennials and Gen Zs. It's going to be the next technological, logical step to create. I don't know if that makes sense, but
No,
that
yeah, it
solution
does. It does.
that solution needs to happen because these generations that are coming are used to technology, are used to being able everything by themselves,
Yeah.
and today they cannot do that because
Yeah.
they have to talk to someone on the phone. they have to send a fax. How do
Yeah.
I send a fax? Technology is not there yet, but it has to be.
Yeah, I think the next step might be some readily accessible apps or something for the Gen Zers. Maybe it'll make it easier for them with the
Yeah.
technology.
And that's what from HomeFlow we want to build. We want to build that technology that will make it so seamless and so easy and so risk-free to buy a home. That's our goal and our mission.
That's great. Oh, that's such a great basis for your company. So I'm going to put all the information for HomeFlow in the description of this podcast, so all the listeners can check it out and message you if they have any other questions about home buying or anything, to reach out to you. But I think that that wraps up the interview for now. Thank you for taking the time out this morning to be a guest on my podcast.
Michael, thank you so much for inviting me, and
Yeah,
thank you so
thank
much for
you.
your services to the community.
Thank you. So thanks again for being here. Once again, I'll put all the information for home flow in the description. And thanks. Well,
Thank
maybe I'll
you.
have to. All right. Have a good rest of the day.
You too. Take care. Bye bye.
Laura definitely provided awesome information on the home buying process and why it's not as difficult as you may think. Like she said, everyone has their own agenda, and you really need to be informed and do your own research before you start trusting people when it comes to the home buying process. So Navicore Solutions offers pre-purchase housing counseling, which is a resource that so many people don't even know about, but should, because it will help you make the right decisions when it comes to purchasing a home. I'll, of course, put all the information for Navicore's pre-purchase housing counseling in the description box. If you're even just thinking about purchasing a home, reaching out to us at Navicore can be helpful to your home buying process. You might be closer financially to buying a home than you may think. So with that being said, this wraps up another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. As always, please follow or subscribe to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And while you're already on Apple Podcasts, you can rate and review us. Goodbye for now, Millennials, Gen Zers, and everyone else listening.